Hi there, fellow survivors, and all you killers out there. My name is Matt, and welcome to the Campfire, a series of chats about the people, places, and things that make up the entity's trials in Dead by Daylight. Now, as we chat, plenty of facts will be presented so that you can learn a bit about the topic at hand, but there will be some speculation and theorizing involved as well. I'll do my best to make sure you know when I go off on a theory and when I'm repeating facts as they've been created by the powers that be. Bear in mind, too, this is going to be a series of chats. Theories and facts will be disproven and contradicted as they're explored. And that's all part of the fun. Now, to start off, I wanted to take a look at my personal favorite survivor, Kate Denson. To give you a little bit of background on Kate, before she was a survivor, she was a musician. She was raised in Pennsylvania, but made a name for herself throughout the southern United States and most importantly in Nashville, Tennessee, the country music capital of America. Safe to say, from both her festival competitions and her skills with an acoustic guitar, her songs about family, friendship, and love were most likely folk or country flavored as well. She's billed as a hopeful songbird, able to make the most of her surroundings, and that seems to be the theme of her trope in this narrative. She's the closest to the good girl we have from the unknowns in the trials, but while there are hints that she is pure-hearted, she's not the virginal, sheltered final girl you'd see in the heyday of horror. She's got tattoos, a penchant for a bourbon nightcap, and she's someone who, to quote, "to cross her would be a mistake." Now, a recurring theme from her background is reflected in her perks, and that is her love of wandering and freedom. All of her perks relate back to escaping and movement somehow, and while it's easy to identify, it's worth mentioning that her perks are named for songs she wrote. Whether she's attempting a stealthy getaway by hiding her scratch marks through her Dance With Me perk, or planning her next move to survive by locating pallets and partitions to vault over via windows of opportunity, her abilities give her a natural edge in evasion. Should she be caught, her final struggle can go just a bit better than some others with her Boil Over perk, allowing her to escape the killer's grasp and make it tougher for them to find a nearby hook. While escaping can keep her alive, in theory, it can also give hope to other survivors with her, affording some time to complete the trial at hand. Digging a bit deeper, there are a few interesting facts about Kate and her ties to the entity's realm. Now, before she had been chosen, it was believed she was actually meant to be paired with the cannibal, Leatherface, who then appeared by himself. This led people to believe she may have been meant to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre final girl Sally Hardesty, but something had changed behind the scenes. That's more of a theory, though, since most sources say Kate was meant to be involved the entire time, but was then pulled into the entity's realm alongside the clown in Father Campbell's chapel. While her journey from Pennsylvania to Nashville echoes another pop country star's rise, one Taylor Swift, her ties to the South could have easily worked into the Texas Chainsaw motif. Instead, we find her associated with a piece of the Crotus Print Asylum, where a carnival is stopped, much like the fair she may have performed at before being taken. Speaking of being taken, though, that brings us to some of the most interesting insights on Kate Denson. Now, as the 13th survivor introduced into the trials, her backstory is the first time the entity's actual method of physically taking a survivor is detailed. It might not surprise anyone, but there's a description of dark spider-like limbs reaching through the canopy of the forest she was taken from. They lifted her through a fog that had rolled in as she strummed her guitar that sounds pretty much like what happens when a survivor is sacrificed to the entity by a killer during a trial, only a little bit less painful since there's no stabbing through the chest, at least so far as we could read. Unlike some of the other survivors, there's also no insinuation or questionable moment that could be interpreted as Kate dying before being taken, a feature that appears in plenty of other backstories up to that point. And by all accounts, she was taken while she was alive. How wasn't she missed or searched for after she disappeared then? Well, when someone has a tendency to walk off into the woods to compose and wander off on her own over and over again, it may take some time for people to realize they're legitimately missing. We don't actually know what happened after she was taken or what effect it might have had in the real world. My guess would be that her disappearance was investigated, her guitar was found out in her usual thinking spot, and after however much time had passed with no sign of her whereabouts, she was presumed dead or became a cold case. Why was she taken in the first place, though? Is there some reason for the entity to bring such an optimistic and strong-willed person into the trials? So, according to what we know, the entity feeds off of hope. The hope that the survivors have to persevere and that their next trial may just lead to their salvation. When they're sacrificed, the entity is sustained by that hope. Now, some of this may turn into theoretical rambling, but after introducing a slew of survivors with troubled pasts, low self-confidence, and other proclivities toward negative emotions, the entity might have decided that it was time to bring in someone to restore the hope of the existing livestock. Finding someone with the will to be so hopeful in the face of such despair and dire conditions would feed the hope of the survivors in a different way. Not by offering the cheese at the end of a very dangerous rat maze, but by adding a mouse who would nurture them and make them forget about their impending test, even if just for a moment at the campfire. Now, by being her natural caregiving self, Kate would bolster the hope of everyone around her, thereby creating more sustenance for the entity to feed off of. What we've also learned recently, though, is that it sounds like the entity crept into Kate's life over time, slowly turning her uplifting melodies into dark and foreboding chords. This doesn't really tell us much, except that the entity probably starts to sow seeds of malevolence much earlier than when it takes its target. The entity doesn't choose sporadically. There's a method involved. Her troubles over her new sound were probably why she wandered off where she did and when she did, and right into the entity's grasp. What does all of this mean to the overarching story, then? Well, first, it means that Kate is special, both for her importance to the entity and to the survivors. If it's true that she was taken to help perpetuate the hope of the survivors, it could be possible that there's a way that the entity could run out of hope to thrive on. On the opposite end, people are a renewable resource, so while this might show that the entity has a vulnerability, it's a long way off from being exploited. It's an ancient evil, so we knew it couldn't be that easy. Given that Kate didn't seem to have an exploitable moment for the entity to take advantage of, this also proves that the entity can take whoever they want, if they want them badly enough. There's a good chance the entity didn't need Kate, but it wanted her very badly, and her kind of determination and unbreakable sunny disposition is tough to come by. Well, that's it for this Sit by the Campfire. If you have any questions or comments, I'm all for some constructive or deconstructive conversation. Feel free to find us on Twitter at Campfire Tender and give a shout or let me know what on my long list of topics you'd like me to chat about next. Thank you for listening. Until next time.